Brad Stevens explains the Jaylen Brown trade by using one word 12 times. You'll hear him next.
Rain and J's, how we started raising business, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. Peace.
Hey there, welcome back to the show. My name is John Karalis, and today's show is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. I am here at the Boston Celtics practice facility, the Auerbach Center. And if you're watching on YouTube, you see over my left shoulder just the faint outline of one of the little shamrocks here as they have these nice little booths here where I can step in and do a podcast, which I'm doing in the aftermath of Bill Chisholm, Brad Stevens spending 45 minutes talking about the Jaylen Brown trade. And it was a lot being said. So probably going to spend the next few days just kind of going through this before we head on out to Las Vegas for Summer League. So I've got 3 clips for you. Later on in the third segment, I'll play you Bill Chisholm talking about how this is not financially motivated. And you can believe him or not, but he's going to tell you why this is not financially motivated. In the second segment, we'll get into what changed between the beginning of May and this beginning of July, where Brad was talking about the margins and all this other stuff. And now all of a sudden here we are with the big Jaylen Brown trade. But let's start off, Brad, just explaining the mindset. Before he even took questions, he made a long opening statement, and this was part of his couple minutes of him explaining why he made this trade.
From a basketball perspective, I think that there are a lot of different angles that we have to consider in every move we make. And there's all the information that we have access to that will ultimately inform each of those moves. When I looked at our team and I looked at where the league was heading, looked at the way that we've finished the last couple years, and also looked at the unbelievable way we've played in the regular season in the last couple years, the path looked a little bit more challenging to me. I might be wrong. I'm not going to stand up here and be defensive about that. But the path looked a little bit more challenging with 70% of our cap. And such a high percent of our usage tied into 2 players. And the reality in this era and in this day and age of the NBA, and you could see it obviously with the last couple of champions and some of the teams that were at the very top of the league when it was all said and done at the end of this year, is that you have to do a great job and you have to have the optionality to do a great job of building out depth that can hopefully replace the irreplaceable individual. And that's not an easy thing to do, right? And we get that. And that's absolutely nothing against Jaylen, right? If you have Jaylen Brown on your team, you should feature him. You should use all those possessions, and you should approach things that way. But I think the importance of depth, and then obviously we have to continue to work on ways to diversify our attack overall. All that being said, still would not have made a move unless we thought the right opportunity presented itself.
He said a lot in that in that little 2 minutes there, but to sum it up, in my opinion, Jaylen Brown made too much money, and for the money that he made, they didn't think that he was going to help them continue to win with what they could put around him, right? So I think this kind of confirms a lot of the stuff that we've been saying here since the trade. When people say, why do this? The collective bargaining agreement has made it clear you cannot have 2 guys making 70% of your cap when both of those guys aren't top 5 players, top 10 players. And Jaylen is, he was second team All-NBA, but the Celtics clearly don't value him anymore. Don't value him at that level. They value him. Brad Stevens was very complimentary, was very careful to make sure he said all the right things about Jaylen going out the door. He was, even when addressing Jaylen being upset about how things went, he's, said he was sorry. And, if there was any sort of lack of communication, he said, he unintentional and so on and so forth. He did say that the Jaylen's agent was aware of all the teams that were in the mix and all of that stuff. So Brad made it sound like the Jaylen Brown side knew mostly of what was going on. I don't know why Jaylen feels like if things went left. Brad was asked about that too. Listen, he was talking for better part of 40 minutes, right? It was a long time, and everybody asked a lot of questions. I had more questions, but there was only so much time, and I asked two, and I didn't get to ask any of the other ones that I wanted. We were all talking beforehand. If we all got to ask all of the questions that we wanted, I'm recording this show about 3 hours after the press conference started. It might still be going. And I think most of these questions were pretty good. So, but it's clear the 70% of the cap tied up in two players is it better be the right two players, because if there's any inkling of it not being, and Brad said it, you look at the way we've gone out the past couple of years, I think that's a pretty direct kind of these two players have to be able to get you through those times. And that's where Brad, I think, in the front office just said, look, the loss to the Knicks, yes, Mitchell Robinson came back and Kristaps Porzingis wasn't healthy enough. And there's a lot of there are a lot of things outside of these guys that you can point to and say, well, that's really the reason. But I think what you're looking at internally is if you're going to have 35% of the cap tied into Jaylen Brown, and he's not able to get you consistently where they think he should get them, they're moving on. And I think that's basically what Brad is saying. We can say what we want about Jaylen Brown, but Brad Stevens and the Celtics have made a determination that Jaylen Brown makes a lot of money, and he's a great player and a great person. Made sure to highlight that he's a great person and did a lot of great work in the community and all of that stuff. But for business-wise, what he makes versus what he gives, they have to go in a different direction. And I think that's it. And he even said it. One other thing that he said in the press conference, that when if the collective bargaining agreement said, hey, the guys you give, the homegrown guys, the guys that you draft and develop, that you give 35% maxes to, if they counted for 25%, we'd be having a different conversation. We wouldn't be here if that was the case. And I think that's an important distinction, that and it's something that people are asking for. And I don't know if the league is going to do that. I don't know if there's going to be any sort of amendment. I don't know if there's going to be any sort of next collective bargaining agreement, that type of thing gets included, if that's a tweak, because I think the league wants this player movement. They want the talent spread out. If the fans don't respond to it well, then maybe things change. But right now, Brad made it clear, because the 35% counts as the 35%. When they won the championship, they were 40 something percent of the cap, not 70% of the cap. That's an important element here. The CBA forced Boston's hand, and they clearly felt like this was the time to make that move. And it's like I've been saying, you get Paul George. Optionality. Brad said optionality 12 times. That specific word. I didn't even count up the other times he said options or flexibility or anything like that. It's very obvious that they want to get out of that contract sooner, even though Paul George makes about the same amount of money. And Bobby Marks did report that he waived the trade kicker, so he makes a few $1 million less, which is helpful if they're trying to stay under the taxes. So that is helpful. That's a good, nice little element to have. It's like 3.5 or 6 million less. So that is an important little step here for the Celtics. But anyway, They want to get out from that contract sooner. I asked Brad a follow-up question. You're still making 70% of you still have two guys making 70% of the cap after this trade. If that's your justification, what do you mean? And he said it's that you get the picks and you get 1 year less. And it's like we've been saying, that pick that contract becomes an expiring contract that is shoppable. Brad made it clear that the picks are valuable. Those could be big swings, either making those draft picks or trading those draft picks to get the next player. So why do it? Why did you make this trade? That answer is the CBA made it so Jaylen Brown's production did not match the 35% of the cap that he occupied, and so they made a different decision. And now with Paul George and those picks, they have an option. They have optionality. They can go and do other things. He stressed that they could retain players. So either, I don't know what they're going to do with Paul George next year, if they're going to try to, they're going to expect him to opt in, encourage him to opt in so he can be traded, or opt out to sign. He's not going to opt out and sign to a new deal. He's like 36. They don't want to do that either. So they're going to come up with other options here with this contract. That's it. End of story as far as why. Jaylen was not disgruntled, according to Brad. Brad was not disgruntled with Jaylen. None of the streaming stuff, none of the off the court stuff, none of it. This was a financial CBA decision. And when I come back, we'll talk about, I asked the question about what changed. I'll play you that, and we'll continue how just the CBA is changing how business is done. It's just how business is done is changing in the NBA. That's all next on the Locked On Celtics podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Odoo. Your business is, you have a bunch of different elements that you get your marketing, your accounting, your sales, your inventory, and you've got systems for all of those things. But do they talk to each other? Do they communicate? That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales to accounting to inventory to marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. Best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal. That's true in sports, just like it is in business. That's true for the Boston Celtics, who are trying to get that same element here by trading Jaylen Brown. Whether it works or not, we'll see. We don't know if the Boston Celtics maneuver is going to work, but they're trying to do it. But we do know that Odoo is going to work for you and your organization. It's going to help you get everything together so everything communicates the way it's supposed to. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try Odoo for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Thanks for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day, being with me every Monday through Friday. This has been a crazy time, and I appreciate you choosing the Locked On Celtics podcast as one of your first stops for some perspective, some information. It's really much appreciated. Thank you for being with me. I'm John Karalis. I cover the Celtics for Sports Illustrated's Celtics on SI. I've been doing this podcast for more than 10 years now. So thanks for being with me on this journey. I asked Brad Stevens, what changed? We went back to May. He said one thing. Now we're doing something different. So I asked him directly about that. Here's what he had to say. A couple months ago, you were talking about how this team was really good when they're full and it's hard to get, and you wanted to work around the margins. Didn't seem like this kind of big swing was in the cards. Was it in the cards then? Or was there, what changed between then and now to go from working around the margins to taking the big swing?
Well, I think there were three right? Or there were let's say a couple of paths, right? A big swing or not, right? So 2 paths. I think for me, and again, I go back to, and this is the problem with anything I say, I don't want it to be taken out of context and misconstrued. Like, Jaylen's amazing, right? What I said earlier is that, I thought our path to getting what we ultimately wanted to do, we probably looked more like the last couple of years. And whatever changes we needed to make were not obvious. To do a deal like Jaylen, it requires the right amount of talent and what we deem to be the right assets coming back. So, again, I wouldn't say I'm sure that was more of my opinion on that day. And, I had a lot of time to study, think, and use the expertise of the people in our building, and try to figure out how best to move forward.
First of all, I want to say that he started off by saying we had 3 things, and then he said, well, 2 paths, big swing, not a big swing. So I'm kind of curious about what the 3 things were now, because one of them, maybe one of them was Giannis. Maybe one of them is something else. Maybe one of them was another path with Derek White and whatever. I don't know, just guessing there, but Brad said it, and now I'm kind of curious. But I didn't get a chance to follow up on that. So what changed? I think there's, I was trying to nail down, and the follow-up question I didn't get to ask was, this collective bargaining agreement has been in effect now for 3 seasons. Jaylen Brown's extension was signed the same year that this collective bargaining agreement went into effect. So the 70% of the cap thing, we knew it was coming. And so with this question, and a question that I couldn't ask, basically, we knew what the second apron penalties were. We knew what everything was going to be. How did we go in the course of 2 months to working around the margins to this? And I think the Celtics probably, in the immediate aftermath, he probably didn't want to make it sound like, hey, we could blow this thing up, because he probably didn't want to, if it didn't happen, you don't want to sow seeds of discontent. Like, I understand that, right? Even if he was planning on trading Jaylen Brown, you got to also plan for not trading Jaylen Brown, meaning you can shop him, you can try, and it's not going to happen. And you don't want to, like, as much as you can minimize the damage, you want to minimize the damage. So you don't want to have, from May 6th through, all of May and you don't want to have any more speculation. We already had tons of speculation. You don't want to have any more speculation on top of that. So I understand that concept. The gathering of the minds and all of that stuff. Yeah, maybe the Celtics did look at the analytics. Brad did say it was a small factor, not a big factor. So maybe some of that came into play, but the Celtics, like I said before, it's obvious that they came together and they said, this isn't going to work at this amount of money. So I think this is just a sign of how things are going to be moving forward. The league, I really hate talking about the CBA. I hate how much I have to know about it. I really despise the level to which this has risen. And I think fans might do too, because, and Brad referenced it, you're listening to this podcast because you want to hear about basketball, you want to hear about your team, and the amount of time I have to spend talking about collective bargaining agreement and the rules and how it's tearing this up and tearing that up, it has to be, you got to sit there and be like, oh my God, can you talk about anything else? But I can't, because it is such a major driver in all of this stuff that is happening. It is such a major factor. It is the determining factor. Hopefully in time, it changes when every team has now gone through their issues and things have been settled, and everybody's hanging around that first apron. Hopefully we can get to just some straight basketball. You make a trade for the sake of basketball reasons. This was not a trade for basketball reasons necessarily, but at the same time, what Brad Stevens is trying to do is he's trying to thread a needle here. And what I don't like is having to tell you that in a few years, if this works the way Brad wants to, in my opinion, in a few years, we're having this conversation about Jayson Tatum. Because Jayson, when he gets to be over 30, whenever he starts to wane, his production starts to wane, and he's making all of that money, $60+ million, there's going to be a threshold. There's going to be a line. And when you get close to that line, the Celtics are going to be like, sorry, you got to go too. That's the cold reality of what this, unless the system changes, this is how it's going to go. And I know you hate it. I know you don't want to hear it. You want people to retire as Celtics. Your favorite players, you want them to retire as Celtics. It ain't happening. I hate to be that person to tell you this, but if it happens to Jaylen, it's the way it's supposed to go now is you get your depth and blah, 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 and all that stuff. You use the Paul George contract to go find another star. If that star is young enough, which you hope he can be, if you find the guy who can be the guy for a little while, then as Jayson starts to get closer to that age where you're like, when's his drop-off coming? And you got a guy young enough behind him, now you trade Jayson for the same type of thing. This system is designed to strangle teams. I say it every show. I'm going to watch my language. I say it every show, it seems like. Rick Grossbeck told us the teams, you get good, you get expensive, you get cut down, and you got to start over. That's what this system is set to do. The Celtics are trying to avoid that, and this trade is the cold, hard truth. That's their way to try to avoid that. That's what this Jaylen Brown trade is. It is no one is untouchable anymore, especially in this environment. Once your production, or once we see that your production is entering that area where we're like, I don't know, trade the guy while he has some value, and they couldn't even get the right value for Jaylen anyway, even though they put on a brave face about that. Once that guy starts to show a decline, or the value is not going to match the money, out he goes. Next guy comes in. And the goal for the team is hopefully you're winning championships along the way. That sucks. I hate this. I hate that I just said all that. I hate that I believe all that, but I think it's true. All right. A lot of people yelling at the owners. A lot of people yelling at Bill Chisholm. He had something to say about that. We'll talk about that next on the Locked On Celtics podcast. Today's show brought to you by Indeed. You need to hire. You need Indeed sponsored jobs, because when workplace chaos hits and you need the right person in the right spot, Indeed sponsored jobs is going to help you connect with employers and help connect employers with the candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So spend less time searching and more time finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In this minute that I'm talking to you, companies like yours will make 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data, worldwide. So I've been in your position. I've had to hire people. I have to go through resumes, all that stuff. Going through that stack and trying to figure out who to talk to is incredible. It's tedious, and it takes you away from actual work that you have to do, other stuff. One great addition, if you make the right call, it can have a ripple effect. It makes you look good. Obviously, it makes your whole team look good. That's what the Celtics are trying to do here. This is what all teams are trying to do. Find the right person with the right skills. You can do that with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time interviewing the candidates who check all your boxes. Save yourself time, stress, and get more results. You can get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go ahead to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support the show by saying you heard about this show, Indeed, on this show. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Thank you for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no off-season. Wes, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, everything you need to know to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So Bill Chisholm was asked about the money, the motivation, and the way the question was framed was, how do you respond to fans who say all you've done, all this team has done since your ownership group took over is get rid of a lot of high-priced players for financial reasons?
I mean, I just don't necessarily agree with the premise there that they were salary-based. This was every decision that was made, the prior decisions, I should say, those were basketball-related decisions. Those were that we are about. We would have gutted the team for the future had we not done those things. The second apron is a real thing, and I know you know that. But so that was not about money. Those are basketball decisions, and I put this one in the same category as well. I mean, there is no the money here. You said it to Brad. Their money's not really. It's marginally different. So it's not about the money at all. This was, again, trying to put together the right set of players and assets to win now, to win next year, the following year, the year after that. That's what this was about. None of these were about money. We have some more room now. Like if we see something we wanted, Brad's got the green light to do that. So. Yeah, I just really, I know there's people feel like, oh, there must be a smoking gun somewhere around the money. That's just not what this is about. And, I can say it and I'll keep saying it, but I'll also prove it to you. When we have the opportunity, we're gonna do that. And we've given ourselves the flexibility to do it now. So, yeah, it's fine to keep asking the question, but because I know we have to prove it, and we will.
So I will say that I agree with Chisholm that the Porzingis, obviously the moves are Porzingis, Holiday, and now Jaylen Brown. And I don't think that if this was a different CBA, I don't think these moves would have been made. If this was a different owner, I do think these moves would have been made, right? You understand? Like, the system is what drove this. I think if Wick was still the owner, these moves get made. I think if Pags bought the team, these moves get made. That we can listen. And I'm not even sitting here trying to defend owners or whatever. This isn't, if he's being cheap, I will tell you that he's being cheap. I have settled on the CBA as the major driving force. I might disagree a little bit about whether Jaylen is able to live up to his contract. I think you can get one more year out of him, especially when you look at the return. I think they could have gotten one more year out of him. I think this basketball team could be still be Jayson and Jaylen and still be really good. And Brad even said that we think they could be really good. He said there was a door open to come back. Like, he could have come back, and he thought that if none of this worked out, that he could have come back. But we're here. I think that some of the stuff that came out today it was never going to be like, we're never going to get certain answers. We're never going to get the answers of, did you miscalculate the market? One of the things that Brad said was they, a lot of the things that the rumors that are out there weren't even true. Teams that were supposedly involved weren't, whatever. There's a lot of he said, she said type of stuff going on. And that's just how it's going to be. Like, we're not going to get definitive answers. We're not going to get all that stuff because there's a little bit of spin going on. But I do believe that this is not a Red Sox thing. I don't think so. Now, I know that I said after Jaylen Brown's thing that there is certainly some. It feels like a valid thing to bring up, and I do listen. Bring it up. I do think that if, like, let me rephrase that. Jaylen Brown said he thinks there's more to it. If there's more to it for real, then there's then Bill we'll figure that out at some point. And I think we'll see that moving forward. Bill Chisholm has a chance to prove this, as you know, after we know they're going to stay under the tax this year. Moving forward after this season, I'm either going to look like a moron or he's going to prove me right that they will spend the money as necessary. They will find the players to compete for a championship. And that's that. I do think that that's how this will go. Man, if he doesn't, then that's going to be ugly, ugly, ugly. But only because I know what the CBA is intended to do. Only because I see it around the league, and from what I've learned about it, it's so destructive. Only because of all that do I hold that higher than, oh man, ownership is cheap. I just hold the CBA thing higher in terms of importance than the other stuff. You can think I'm crazy. You can think I'm stupid. And you might be right. You might be right. I don't think that's what's going on here. Honestly, I don't. I know that after Jaylen spoke, there's that feeling certainly was strong, but having thought about it, having sifted through everything, this kind of didn't surprise. None of this stuff surprised me at all today. Obviously, there's a lot more in this 45 minutes. So this is one podcast. I'll get Tom Westerholm on. We'll hash out some of the other stuff. We'll get more reaction. Give me your reactions in the comment section. Send me questions about the stuff from the press conference to johnkaralis.com/mailbag. I will answer those questions. So if you have a question for me, send it to me there so I can get that, and I'll do another mailbag to kind of answer your stuff. And then we'll move on to Summer League. But there's a lot here. Give me your take. Give me your perspective, because I want to hear what you have to say. And then I will address that as well. So I do appreciate you being here, listening, watching, all of that stuff. And then I appreciate you sharing the podcast, telling everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.